given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Supernatural, metaphysical, paranormal. You know, all those things you've been wondering about? Are you ready to go deeper into the realms of the unknown? I hope you've got your walking shoes on, because life is an adventure, and this is the journey. Come on, let's go. Hello and welcome to the show, everyone. It's Wednesday night, and this is the Journey Radio Show. Hey, I'm Jen Cruz, your host tonight. We're showing up as the She-Squatchers because we're going to be talking about our favorite subject, which is cryptids. You know, those creatures that are believed to exist but are not quite sure because they haven't been scientifically proven yet. We've got my trusty teammate on the line. I've got Jenna Grova. Hey, are you there?
I am here, and boy, it's been a long time, but I'm so glad to be back. All right. Hey, everybody.
Awesome. And we have a very special guest tonight. We've got Dr. John Stamey is returning tonight. He's uncovered some new information, new stories about the Lizardman. And so he wanted to come onto the journey and share those new stories with us. And I think talk about his new book. So before we go anywhere further, let's just welcome John onto the show. Hey, John, are you there?
I'm right here. How are you doing?
Very good. Thanks for coming on the show.
I'm so glad to be here. I always enjoy being here with you girls. And I think it was almost 2 years ago when I talked about my first book and the first Lizardman Festival. So now we're back again with really round 2.
What is going on?
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me fill you in. We had the second Lizardman Festival. It was wonderful. It was in Bishopville, South Carolina, the philosophical and potentially home of the Lizardman, although I'll be talking a little more about that later. In the past year, I have come up with 2 really interesting news stories that I think are worth bringing out. They're a little more detailed and a little more complicated than what we had done in the book. I want to talk about those stories and a couple of other things, and maybe where Lizardman has been seen recently, and just a couple more things that I want to share with all of your listeners. But again, it's great to be here. Thank you so much. And can I get started?
Absolutely. I do want to just say, John, could you tell us a little bit about your background? And for those who are listening who may not be familiar with Lizardman, if you could give us a quick sum up on that, that would be awesome.
Sure. Okay. About me, I'm a former college professor. I really do have a doctorate and too many master's degrees. I'm addicted to learning. I'm addicted to several things, learning and rare coins. Other than that, it's just, other than that, I'm okay. But I really do love learning. And when I left the standard academic world, I've always been interested in the paranormal world. So I decided it was time to do some research and to do some serious research. I don't believe in just this cursory glance or silly stories. I like to talk to folks that really have got some experience with sightings and that have knowledge in this area, because a lot of people really do. The paranormal world seems to not be very well recognized by the standard academic community, although there are a couple folks. Christine Simmons Moore, she's at West Georgia College and State University, and she has a PhD in parapsychology from the University of Liverpool. She's a lovely lady. I had some courses with her a long time ago. Then there's, of course, John Palmer and Richard Broughton and Dr. Sally Reinfeather, all 3 with PhDs. John Palmer is the editor of the Journal of Parapsychology. A lot of psychology and a lot of interesting electronics and electromagnetic work and spiritual work goes on to articles that are in that journal. So it's making its way into the academic world, I think. And I will do a quick aside. You're talking about cryptids. One of my favorite cryptids of all time is, of course, Bigfoot. And I know that you girls like Bigfoot, right?
Absolutely.
Well, I'm pleased to announce that the second Bigfoot conference to be held at an accredited academic institution is happening February the 29th. I will be running the Bigfoot Town Hall at Aiken Technical College in Aiken, South Carolina. That's kind of a big deal. I don't remember the gentleman's name, but he's head of the Texas Bigfoot Association, and I met him. He was holding down Lyle Blackburn's booth at Horror Hound, where you and I were, and he was telling me that he actually ran the first Bigfoot conference at the University of Texas about 20 years ago. So I thought I was going to be the first, but I was the second, and I'm pleased to be the second. I'll say we're the first in the Carolinas. How's that? So
wow,
we'll be doing that.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. And what I'm going to do, now that school's back in session, I'm going to be talking to some folks in the sociology and anthropology departments there and see if any of them would like to join us and be a panel member so that we can involve some of the faculty from Aiken Tech. I think that's important. The more we can involve pure academicians, let's say academicians who do this to make a living, the more we can involve them with work on cryptids, I think the better off we are. We're going to, ultimately, you give us 100 years, we'll still be around, all three of us, won't we, right?
Well,
I hope so.
I don't know about that, but 100 years.
We'll
I'm
do
really
our,
old.
no, the both of you will look as beautiful as you do now. But what I'm saying is, well, if we can, in 100 years, if we can be around, there will be a department of cryptozoology in many universities. I just think it's going to happen. We're seeing so much right now from the world of UFOs and the federal government, and especially Navy pilots. That seems to be breaking loose right now. And I think that with so much experience on Bigfoot, because the reason I'm bringing up Bigfoot, even though we're talking about Lizardman, Bigfoot does have a lot of attention. There are sightings every day in this country alone. That's too many sightings for this whole thing not to become part of mainstream science. And I'm pleased to say that, and I'm doing my part with the Aiken Technical College conference, and we'll see how that goes. I'll have some outtakes. I'll be glad to share them on Facebook, share them with you ladies, and we can see who knows what we could do up there with an academic institution that might want to listen and be very progressive. So anyway, the book has a couple of very important stories. The Lizardman story, I'll answer your second question with the story. In Bishopville, South Carolina, that is 45 minutes due east of Columbia, South Carolina. Columbia is in the middle of the state, and Bishopville is, I said, about 45 minutes to the east of that. It's just a little tiny town. Lee County is the second smallest county in terms of population. And what happened let me get my facts exactly right. On July the 20th, 1988, there was a young man named Christopher Davis. He worked at McDonald's, and he was driving home in his little Toyota, and he had a flat tire on Browntown Road, maybe about 4 miles outside of Bishopville, South Carolina. It was around midnight. It was not too dark. He was very fortunate because he had moon out, and he was able to figure out how to change a tire without being in pitch black. Because I'll tell you what, I've had a flat tire when it has been completely dark and you couldn't do anything, and that was frightening. I was very fortunate that I actually had friends in that town, and they told me to, and here's some good advice to listeners. If you have a flat tire and it is completely dark, you can drive on that rim. It is safer to drive on that rim and get to perhaps a church parking lot, because churches have signs that are usually lit up, and you actually have some light, and that's a good thing. Just a street light may not be enough, but if you find a church it'll normally have a lighted sign, and that's probably the safest place to be if you're trying to search through your trunk like I do to try to find the donut. But anyway, he had moonlight, and so what he did was he changed his tire. Then he heard some rustling out there because it was in the summertime, and he was at a Butterbean a butterbean patch. And when we say patch, it's like 10 acres, but we call that a patch down here. So he's at a butterbean patch and he hears something moving in there. He said, oh no, there's something out there, a deer or maybe something, maybe a wildcat or something that's kind of scary. So he hurried up and he finished the changing of his tire. And so then he's standing up, stretching, getting ready to close down. His tire iron is on one of the lug nuts. And he looks up, and there is something that appears to be about 8 to 9 feet tall, is dark green, darkish green from what he could tell in the moonlight, and he was terrified. Have you ladies ever been terrified when you have come across something that shouldn't be there? I bet you have, haven't you?
I know the feeling, definitely.
Oh my goodness. And so anyway, he jumped in the car, tire iron still on the lug nut, and he got out of there. And according to him, this thing caught up to his car because he couldn't go that fast because he had the tire iron, it was fairly securely on that lug nut, and the thing jumped on the roof of his car until he was able to swerve a little bit and knock the thing off the car. So then he drove about another 2 miles to his parents' house where he lived, and he just shut the car down, ran inside, out of breath. And his mother said, well, what's wrong with you? He said, nothing. She said, well, something is. He said, I'm going to bed. So the next morning he wakes up really early. His father is up and he says, Dad, I have to show you something. He said, I saw the car. What happened? He said, your tire iron is still on. He said, did you see those scratch marks on top of the car? And his dad said, what was that, son? And he told him the story, and he was shaking. And I think a lot of us can tell if someone's shaking and really frightened, it's probably not a lie. You can tell when someone's had a traumatic experience. I mean, it's certainly equivalent to PTSD. So his father took him into the sheriff's office. He didn't want to go. He didn't want to repeat this story. The sheriff at that time was Liston Truesdale, former FBI agent, very knowledgeable. He basically retired back to Lee County in Bishopville and became the sheriff. And he was one heck of a good sheriff, very well-respected lawman, and very thorough on investigation. So Chris told him the story. So they all drove out, and he could see some scuffle marks and some dirt that had been kicked up onto the road, but that was all he could see. So anyway, he said, I don't know what to tell you, but he took a statement from Chris. Actually, Chris wrote the statement, and then Chris drew a picture of what he thought the lizard man looked like. It was kind of primitive picture, but it did look like something that we would envision a lizard man would look like. Well, over the end of the summer, so that was the end of summer of 88, and then in the spring, summer, and fall of 89, it turns out there were over 13 sightings of something that appeared to be a lizard man. Now, it's interesting because that comes from Lyle Blackburn's book, Lizard Man, The True Story of the Bishopville Monster. And we all like Lyle, and he does a pretty thorough job. When he takes to writing a book, he does a very thorough job. But what was interesting about these sightings is that half of them were a green, scaly thing with red eyes, and then another half of them were covered with matted brown hair. Half the sightings seemed to be an amphibious creature, a lizard creature, and the other half, frankly, matched the description of Bigfoot. Now, I'm going to draw a parallel. I'm going to tell you two stories. So I guess I've covered what is Lizard Man. It was seen in 88 and 89. It was so prevalent, and there were such crowds that by the middle of the fall of 88, ABC Good Morning America came down there with a crew, set up on Browntown Road, waiting for the Lizard Man.
Oh, really?
There were thousands of people there. Yeah. And that is when they found a footprint and took a cast of it. Some people say the cast is a fake. Some people say it was real. Well, what I can tell you is, here's an aside, but it's very important to this story. When I run the Tennessee Bigfoot Conference up in Kingsport, Tennessee, whenever someone comes in, pays their $5, when they start standing right next to that stand where I am and waiting for people to leave where I'm alone, I know the first thing out of their mouth is, I've got a story I need to tell you. So there was this nice young man and his fiance. He said, I got a story to tell you. I said, okay. He said, there's a swamp near here, and this past summer, my girlfriend and I saw a lizard man. I said, you're kidding. We saw the footprint of the lizard man. And I said, all righty, here's your chance. Draw me the picture of the footprint of the lizard man. He drew the three-toed pointed foot. And then I can't tell what it is, but there is another distinguishing feature of a real lizard man footprint, and he got it right. The only pictures I've seen of a lizard man cast turn out to be of the fake one, because there is a fake one roaming around. But this one is the real thing. And it's corroborated by a member of South Carolina Paranormal, who has a relative that actually had a lizard man for a time on their property. And he said, this is what the footprint, and he drew the footprint with that distinguishing mark. And it's exactly what this attorney drew, up in Kingsport, Tennessee. So to me, that's pretty good evidence. That's what I think. Now, why lizard man in Lee County, South Carolina? I think that's a good question. Lee County, South Carolina, and Sumter County, which are both east of Columbia, they're in scape or swamp. It's a 500,000 square foot swampy area. Now, the characteristics of the summer of '88 were a drought and extremely hot weather. And what that does is that lowers the level of the lakes and streams and swamps there in the middle of South Carolina. When you lower the water level, because that's fresh water, what happens is from the ocean, salt water will creep up from the coast toward the center of South Carolina because the water level's lower. Now what you have is and they start seeing a lot of strange animals and creatures in the swamp that they don't normally see because they are pushed up by the salt water. And that's something that I had never heard. I did not know it until a fellow who's a local businessman, he loves lizard man, and he told me that. I said, because I asked him, I said, well, was there anything distinguishing about the summer of '88 and the summer of '89 and the summer of '90? So he told me. So then I went back and I looked up climate records, and I found that they had the same conditions in the early 30s. That was one of the hottest summers on record. That's when the Midwest became the Dust Bowl. Drought everywhere, blistering hot weather. And then back in the early teens. Well, I've talked to two of the older people, and they talked about the lizard people of Lee County from 1910. So now we have two correlation points. And that's the best I've got today. I couldn't find any stories from the 30s. But that's what we've got. Now we have a reason why potentially scape or swamp, because they got pushed. They got pushed up. And now here comes the other fascinating thing about the lizard man. We don't see very many of them. We don't see very many Bigfoot either. We sure do see them with frequency, but it's not like there's tons of them. And I may have mentioned this on the previous show, or I may not have, because I think I finally got this part of the puzzle figured out after the first Lizardman Festival. There's something called minimum viable population. And that's a biological theory. It's well known. It's well regarded. And what they say is it takes a population of at least 750 people or entities, animals or whatever, a population of at least 750 to sustain a colony of that species. So we'd need 750 people on a large desert island, and that could probably sustain a population. Well, for us to have lizard men and Bigfoot, we'd have to have a population of 750 of them. Now, let me tell you something. If there was a population of 750 Bigfoot between Georgetown, South Carolina, and Charleston, which is the Francis Marion Forest, or if there was a population of 750 lizard men out there in Scape Ore Swamp in those two counties, well, we'd be bumping into them every day, wouldn't we? Think of a town that has under 1,000 people. Okay, can you think? I mean, I would think of Ainer, South Carolina. It's about 1,100. Can you think of a small town near you that has about 750 to 1,000 people?
That's where I grew up. It's a town of 803.
Perfect. Well, now just think, if all those people were transplanted into a swamp, you'd be running into them all the time, right?
Depends on how big the swamp is, I guess.
But if they were in a reasonable proximity that they could work together and live together and procreate together, you'd be running into them all the time. So what does that lead to? To me, that leads to the following. Because I'm a firm believer in portals and interdimensional beings. And that tells me that while they're all not standing here, they're going in and out of portals. And there's at least 750 of them near Scape Ore Swamp of lizard men. And they pop out and pop in. Because these stories of lizard men, this is leading me to my next to my next part of my talk about, we got new stories. The stories didn't stop in 1990. Things quietened down, but the stories haven't stopped. So I think what we'll do, let me start with the oldest of the new stories, which comes from about 1992. Then I know we'll have to take a moment for a break, and then I'll come up with the more recent stories and the more recent observations. Is that okay?
That sounds great.
Yeah, I was just trying to watch the clock and I'm just trying to be a good guest. I want to be invited back. So
there you go.
All righty.
You're always a good guest, by the way, John.
Thank you very much. And you are the most wonderful hostesses. Now, I'm over in Camden, South Carolina, which is 20 miles away. And what was I doing? I was running the Krampus Festival. So it was the fall. It was maybe about October. And so I'm just whenever I'm running an event in a town, I like to walk around the town, because that's the best way to find vendors, to tell people about the event, is to just do it, just do it on the ground. So I walked into historic Camden, beautiful place. It's a Revolutionary War battleground, and they've got this gorgeous old house, which is the office, the museum, and the store. So I walked in there, and it was a Saturday afternoon. There was this nice fella. I won't mention his name. He said, "What do you do?" And of course, you know me. I'm always going to carry a poster or one of my books. I'll say, "This is me. I do the Lizardman Festival. Isn't that great?" "Oh yeah, whatever." So and I started talking about Lizardman. He said, "There's a lot of Lizardman around here still." So I turned that poster over and started taking notes. Right? And the guy said, back in the early 1900s, he was talking about 1990s. I said, "You mean 1990s?" He said, yeah. That's when the CB was real big around here. Y'all remember the CB, the Citizens Band Radio? I mean, that was our internet back in the early 90s. I mean, we didn't have anything like the internet, so that was our internet. That's how we could connect without using a telephone over a fairly reasonable area. And he said, well, we'd have the TV on in the den, and we'd have the CB on in the kitchen. And the family, we'd just gravitate back and forth. Now, this is Americana at its best. And he said, we'd hear truckers on Highway 34. Highway 34 was the truck route, as opposed to Interstate 20, which ran parallel, because 34 went on up north of Columbia, and that's how the truckers could get to some of those smaller towns. And he said one night, because they were always talking, and we'd talk back to them, and everybody was having a good time. When one night this trucker said, he was just sitting on the side of the road taking a little break, he said, "Whoa, there's a car coming here, and there's something running after it." I said, really? He said, yeah. And he said the guy stopped, got out of the car, and ran away. And that thing got up to the car. It was a small car, and it looks like a lizard man. And that lizard man picked the car up and walked it off the road and into the swamp. The fella ran across the field on one side of the road, but on the other side were dense trees and a swamp. The car was gone. And he said, and I'm getting out of here too. He blew the horn to see if he could get the fella, but he said the fella was just running across that field and was never coming back, he didn't think. So he took off. And now, and you may say, oh, that's a crazy story. Not really. I mean, there's no trucker that really could even make something like that up. I don't think. So anyway, that's a pretty good story with some fairly good detail. And this is told by just a fella who lives with, I think he's got 3 or 4 brothers and sisters and his parents. And they live actually out on Highway 34. And he said, that's what we were told. And everybody was a little frightened. And we've also had other people say that they have seen a lizard kind of creature wandering around out there on Highway 34, which is on the edge of Scape-Ore Swamp. So there have been a number of sightings of that. And also regarding Bigfoot, a good friend of mine couldn't wait to see me. It was about a year ago. She said, John, I've been meaning to tell you this. My son and his best friend were out. They were like hunting deer in the edge of Scape-Ore Swamp. And they heard something coming through the woods. And it started sounding so big that they climbed up a tree. And they saw something that was about 10 feet tall and hairy. And they shot their guns up in the air. They didn't want to hurt it, but they wanted to get the heck away, have it get the heck away from them. After they shot a couple rounds, the thing ran off. They ran to their truck, and they've never been back to that area since. Sounds like, to me, a little bit of a Bigfoot sighting. So, there are, Bigfoot's all over. And it seems to me that that was a Bigfoot sighting in the same area where Lizardman had been seen. And several times. Sightings which appear even through today. But people just don't talk about them. They're tired of being ridiculed and everything. So that's pretty much the sightings, the beginning of the sightings that have come since the end of the book that talked about, some of the standard ones and everything. So, it's kind of crazy that the sightings continue. Nobody wants to talk about them. They're afraid of ridicule. In fact, I can tell you the town of Bishopville is a little embarrassed about Lizardman. They don't like it. They don't like anything cryptid because they think it makes them look like a bunch of silly country bumpkins. There's talk that some old fellow there put on a burlap bag and played Lizardman. Well, not this many years. And there's a pretty legitimate story of a Lizardman jumping in front of a car on that Highway 34. Now, no human being in a burlap bag is going to jump in front of a car. Jen and Jenna, are they?
No, absolutely not.
And so,
definitely not.
You've just got to use, as we say in the hills, you've got to use some common sense. Behaviors of this entity are not typical of a human. I'm not going to jump in front of a car that's going 40 miles an hour. I'm not going to die. I'll die another way, but not that way.
I hear you.
In stupidity and infamy, I wouldn't do that. So yes, there are sightings out there. So what we'll do is, I guess I'm going to start talking a little bit about these 2 new stories, which are phenomenal, and they're pretty much well documented. One has resulted in a fatality, and the other one ended a friendship of 2 boys, because there's a lizard man attached to a house in rural South Carolina, believe it or not. When I say attached, it comes to visit at night, and they're prepared for it. So that's where we'll go next. And where is Lizardman now? Sightings south of, are you ready? Or do we want to wait?
I think we should wait till after the break. Let's do the cliffhanger.
So I will say sightings just south of ...
And hold that thought, everybody. We're going to go to our commercial break. We'll be back in 2 minutes with Dr. John Stamey. Stay tuned. All right, good job. So we're off to commercial. We're still recording our video, so you're still on video.
Great.
Yeah. Going good. Lots of people in the chat.
I think I have told this story to the point that I can make it I can make a reasonable set of transitions from event to event to event, and it makes sense. Now, will this be archived so that I can listen to it?
Yep, I'll upload it to our YouTube channel as soon as we're done tonight.
That is great, because I'm going to want to download this, because I think this is the most coherent presentation that I've made, and
awesome.
I feel good. I feel good about it, and it ended perfectly to go to the next story. So I've probably got about 10 minutes, and then we can take questions. Is that okay?
That sounds good. People were asking about the specifics of what does a footprint of a lizard man look like. So they're going to want to know that little secret thing.
I'll tell them everything, but the one secret thing, because only the people that have actually seen one know it. And is that okay? Because I want to make sure that we don't just have a flood of sightings with people know. Is that okay? Or if you want me to, I'll tell it. Whatever. Woman's intuition. Which one do you want?
I don't know. They were asking if it was like had a dew claw.
No, it's just a little triangle in the middle of it.
Okay.
It's a depressed one. Anyway, it's whatever.
All right, here we go. Back to the show.
Hello.
And roll.
Hey, and welcome back to the show, everyone. This is the Journey Radio Show, and we're back from our break. But hey, we're the She-Squatchers, so won't you check us out online at she-squatchers.com. And hey, won't you please come over to our YouTube channel and give us a subscribe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got challenged by another YouTube person to a race to see who can have more subscribers before the middle of April. So we really need to win this because he started it. We need to win it.
I love the way you said that, Jen. He started it. He did start it. We really want to beat him. So please subscribe and we're going to rock it. Sorry.
Okay. Come over to our YouTube channel. Please subscribe because we need to win this. Make him regret ever challenging us, right? Girl power. Come on. So please do that, and come on over to our Facebook page at She-Squatchers Official and give us a like and follow us there for all the latest of what's going on with us. So we're back to the show. We've got amazing Dr. John Stamey with us tonight. He's talking about stories of a lizard man. So he left us on a cliffhanger. So let's get back to that. Hey, John.
Hey, I'm going to keep you on the cliffhanger for just another minute. If you've got a challenge, then I'm going to invite all the She-Squatchers that we can get to come on ScaryCast, and we're going to run a campaign to get you as many likes on YouTube as we can get you.
Awesome. That would be awesome.
How in the world could I not do that? I mean, yeah, so we'll do it. It's on a Thursday night at 10 p.m. and we'll talk to you later, and you can let everyone know and come over there, and we're going to hear She-Squatcher stories. This is going to be awesome. So anyway, thanks a lot. All right, ... south of Savannah, Georgia, in the Savannah River, and I have some frightening photographs. And I'm going to take a group. It's not going to be me and a buddy and a shotgun. None of that. I'm going to take about 5 people out there when it gets spring, and that's going to be a very opportune time to hopefully see Lizardman. We're going to talk to him. I believe that they are cryptids. I believe they are interdimensional, and I believe that they are intelligent enough and they can understand us. That may not be what other people say, but I think they can, whether it's through mind speak or they can hear us talk. And they can know that if we sound calm and we're there as friends, they might come up and be friends, or at least show themselves and then duck back in the water. Now, if I'm wrong, you'll be doing a special on the former Dr. John who ended up in the Savannah River. But we'll see if we can do that this spring, and I'll give some coverage of that. It'll be a lot of fun. I'll have some pictures and everything. Yeah, in Savannah. In other words, why do you think we're doing this Bigfoot town hall in Aiken, South Carolina? Because it's right outside of Augusta, which is right outside of that area in the Savannah River. That's why we're doing this. So I wouldn't go down there just to go. I mean, although Aiken's a beautiful place. Anyway, here's a couple news stories. My buddy Eddie, and he doesn't mind if I use his name. Good guy, nice family. He's a hard worker, real solid guy in the community. And what happened was I was at the Carolina Fan Expo at my table with my big Lizardman poster. And so he comes walking up and he starts looking. I didn't know who he was, but he did have the cutest little kid and dressed up as I forgot whatever. And he actually won the kids cosplay contest. So, great family. So he says, "That's Lizardman, isn't it?" Of course, it said Lizardman Festival. I said, "Well, yes, it is. Do you know about Lizardman?" He said, "I got a story. Can I tell you?" I said, "Yeah, come on. I'm just going to turn this over so that people won't come talk to me while I'm here at the table with you, and I'm going to jot your story down." Turns out when Eddie was a high school senior and he was prone to run around, party, and hang out with his buddies, he and a buddy on a Friday night went out and got drunk. High school seniors have done that before. So they go back to his buddy's house. It's late at night. They both have the spins, so they go up to his buddy's room. Eddie crashes on the floor. There was at least carpet on the floor, and his buddy crashes in his bed. So they're Eddie's at least in between being awake and going to sleep and being a little bit drunk. And he starts hearing some chains rattling outside against a structure. So he goes to the window, pulls the blinds, opens them up, and he sees this thing pulling on a chain on the garage. And the first thing he notices, he remembered the chain when they drove up. And the chain was like at about the height of his face. And whatever this thing was, the chain came up to this creature's waist. All right? So he bangs around on it, kicks the door, does all this, and then he just kind of walked away. Eddie was frightened, but he just was so tired he just went to bed. Woke up the next morning, and he could smell bacon and eggs cooking. His buddy was not on his bed. He was apparently up. So Eddie goes downstairs and says, "Did y'all not hear all that commotion going on last night about 2 a.m? They all said, "Yeah." And his friend said, "Oh, that's Lizardman." And Eddie said, "What?" "We got a Lizardman around here. There's swamp over there. Lizardman's been around ever since we've been here, ever since my grandparents have been here." And they have that chain to keep the Lizardman from getting into the garage. That's the story.
How did it keep on from getting in there?
It was chained over the door and around the building.
Oh. Well, now, what was in the garage? I want to know.
A car.
You mean
the family car?
Would have done what would he have done with a car?
Oh, I guess I didn't tell you. Lizardman has a thing for car bumpers. He ripped off bumpers from cars. I'm not joking. And so I'll finish this story, and then I'm going to tell you the really frightening story, and you'll understand about car bumpers. But yeah, every time Lizardman has been reported as being seen, he's ripped the bumper off a car. Isn't that crazy? Yeah.
I did not know that.
It's right.
I didn't either.
And it's in Lyle's book too. And it's in the stories that I've been told.
Just hold on myself, didn't I? I haven't read Lyle's book.
That's okay. That's okay. If you got Amazon Prime, it's free. It's a free download. I get it. It's a great book.
I'm getting it. I planned on getting it before. I just never did. I love his way of writing, his style of writing. I was going to ask you, had they lost bumpers in the past? I mean, did this Lizardman like keep taking their bumpers and that's why they put that up? I mean, how many bumpers did they lose? You know?
Several, 5 or 6.
Oh, wow.
But here comes the story of stories. I decided that it is 8 years since this happened. We're past 7 years. And so I'm just going to go ahead and start telling this story. It's true. It's in the newspapers. I've talked with people in the area, and it's a very sad story. There were 2 boys that lived in Lake Norman, North Carolina. That's a nice suburb outside of Charlotte. And it was Friday night. And I don't know what it is about high school seniors. So they decided they wanted to get some beer and drive down to Myrtle Beach and watch the sun come up. That is the recipe for a disaster, period. It'll either put you in jail or you'll have a wreck or something will happen if you get about 24 cans of beer apiece and drive from Charlotte to Myrtle Beach. Now you see, it's going to be bad. So they did it. They got their beer, and so they hightailed it off. And then nobody ever heard from them again. So parents called in a missing persons report. And of course, the first thing the cops did was they put out an APB to all of the hotels in the Myrtle Beach area and in Florence, which is on the way, to see if they had spent the night in a hotel. Nothing turned up. So then came a statewide or a 2-statewide search for these boys. They came from fairly well-off families, nice kids, typical, got into a little trouble. They wanted to find him. There was a panic. And I remember this. And so what happened is they searched all the way down Interstate 77 to Columbia, and then Interstate 20 from Columbia to Myrtle Beach. And that's how you would go. Okay? Couldn't find him. 2 weeks, they couldn't find him. So then somebody had the bright idea. They said, they've got to be in water. They've run off the road. They've got to be in water. So they took a chance and they started in Columbia, searching down Interstate 20 that goes to Florence, South Carolina. So the first legitimate place where they could actually see, it was a pretty wide creek called Buck Creek. Exit or mile marker 96. So the search party walks down, and halfway down the embankment, they find a car bumper with their license plate on it. Okay? Now, what I can tell you is they had to get over this large, there's a fence there. In South Carolina, at least here in South Carolina, they have metal fences so that you can't get, if there's an interstate, there's a bridge going one direction and a bridge going in another. And since what was underneath the bridge was Buck Creek, they had a barricade that you couldn't get down. You couldn't drive down it. So, but they're going down, they find that, and then they go down there, they stick a pole in the water, and they feel something metal. They came back, or they went and got a crane, and what they found was the boy's car turned upside down in Buck Creek. Both kids were dead. Now, what I can tell you is I am getting ready to do an interview with the reporter. Believe it or not, the one reporter I know in that area happens to be the person that covered that story. He was there when they lifted the car out of the water. Nobody seems to have the accident report. Okay? The city police, the county police, state police don't seem to have the accident report. I find that very curious. So I'm going to present myself to the medical examiner's office, because what they were going to do, it said in the newspaper article, well, we're going to check for blood alcohol content, which means an autopsy. What you want to bet that I can't find an autopsy report? What are the odds? If there's no accident report and all we've got is a newspaper story with a picture of the car being lifted out of the water, don't know, but I'm going to find out. And that's going to be the first story in version 2 of Lizardman. Not going to put any names of these kids. Their parents have been through enough. There are crosses on the side of the interstate. But the story, here's where the story gets freaky. You can't get down there. You can't drive down there. So I asked 3 people that I know that live in Camden, which is the nearest municipality. And I asked one person, the person, you remember your town of 750 people, Jen? There was one person that knew everything, right? Or maybe
Yes.
several. But you know that one girl, the one person that knew everything. You'd ask a question, and here came the answer before you finished the question. I asked that person in Camden. I said, what happened? How'd they drown? How'd they get there? And it took 1/2 a second for her to say, we all think it was Lizardman.
Oh.
My best guess is 2 drunk 17 and 18-year-old boys getting a little bit surly and a little bit rock and roll and stopping perhaps in the middle of the median to be excused at 4 o'clock in the morning. They get out of the car and they see something and they're drunk and they kind of start yelling at it. And it's probably 8-9 feet tall, pure muscle. Doesn't want anything to do with them. They get back in the car. He just picks up the car, walks it down there and slams it in the creek. That's the best. That is about the best I can come up with on how in the world, because there were no tire marks. You could see the marks when they pulled off the interstate. There were no more tire marks. Yeah. That's the most frightening story I've ever heard, because that could happen to anybody at 3 o'clock in the morning. For whatever reason, you just have to stop and take a break because you don't know where the next rest area is. You get out and all of a sudden there's something about 8-9 feet tall. I mean, assuming Lizardman exists, that's a viable solution to how this happened. And I can't wait. I told the guy, I said, I'm going to ask you about a story you covered. He said, great. Which one? I said, it's going to be a surprise. He doesn't know why I'm coming to talk to him. I don't want him to figure out. I want to see his reaction. I'm going to tape record it. And I think it'll be a stellar interview in the quest for cryptid research. I do. And I mean, what? Go ahead.
What if he's listening now? He kind of knows, right?
He wouldn't be listening to this story. He wouldn't be listening to your podcast.
Okay.
He's not that guy. He is watching the Sci-Fi Channel.
Ooh, I like him already. I love sci-fi.
Yeah, he's watching the Sci-Fi Channel. He would never be watching this because I'm sure this is the last hour of the primetime movie tonight on Sci-Fi. So that's where he is. He'll never hear this.
I have a question, Dr. John.
Yes, ma'am.
Where did they find the bumper in relation to the car?
Halfway down the embankment.
And the car was all the way down in the embankment in the water.
Upside down in Buck Creek, yeah.
Were the boys? Do you know if the boys were in their seatbelts? I suppose that's.
Here's the deal. I'm going to ask. That's part of my list of questions. The odds are they shouldn't have their seatbelts on. The odds are if they just jump back in the car. So you see, I can ask him questions. And it's a shame, but it might have been a problem of their own making. If you see something, you don't want to be the bad guy and act like a jerk to something that's 10 feet tall.
Yeah.
Bigfoot doesn't, I categorically know that Bigfoot does not like it if you sit there, laugh at him, point at him, and throw a stick at him. I think Bigfoot would get mad.
I'd get mad if someone laughed at me.
Jen, would you get mad? I know Jenna would. I would.
Oh, heck yeah. I'd be throwing that thing right back at him real quick.
Yeah.
I'm the passive one.
She'd be going, Jenna, Tammy.
So anyway, there's my story, and I'm totally sticking to it. And I'm going next week to see the reporter, to go to the medical examiner's office, and to go. I'm going back to the state, the county, and the city, and I'm gonna see who's got that report.
Well,
See,
you've got to let us know what you're finding out, because this is a really interesting case. I just feel for the family and the town.
I feel for the families up in Lake Norman, and that's why I don't want to mention the names. But I'll have pictures of the and I'm actually gonna. I think I will get permission to reprint the story, but I will redact the names. I'm not going to be a party of the names. But the event, well, we can't erase the event from our timeline of history. So I'm going to find out, and we'll see. How about I'll let you know what I find, and when I get the book ready to go in the middle, maybe I can do a 5-minute or something and tell what I found out. You can let me know if we can do that.
Okay.
In fact, I will make it this will be the world premiere of the solution, or at least what I find. I'll wait and do it here right before the book comes out. If you want me to, we'll talk. We'll talk because we think She-Squatchers are great. All right.
Aww, thank you. See,
So,
I got a question. Can I ask it quick? And then this is going back to the very first part of our interview, when you were talking about how, the water is flushing them out, the seawater was flushing them out. I was just thinking, when you were talking about that, with all the wildfires in California, I'm curious to see or find out if there's more sightings. You know what I mean?
Well, I did hear, and it was on some news service, that several people saw Bigfoot, or groups of Bigfoot, walking across the road away from the fires. This was a couple of years ago. Okay. So I mean, but then again, they can just pop into a portal and be in Alaska.
Well, then there's so much to find out. I love it. So you just think that they're probably using the portals?
I think they are. I mean, if we had 750 in a standard force, we'd be bumping into them all the time. But I think they go into portals. I think they just come here. From what I hear about the behavior of Bigfoot, Bigfoot enjoys watching us.
Mm-hmm. Hey, we're people watchers too.
I know. And they're thinking, those crazy humans. Oh my goodness.
Look at them, huh? No, I'm kidding. But no, really, go ahead, Jen.
I have questions in the chat room that we have to ask. So,
oh, sure.
People are wondering, what do you think Lizardman is? Is he something that comes from the earth? Is he an alien? Is he interdimensional? People are wondering about that. What is the consensus idea on that? Not just yours. Also, they're asking about the Australian fires and if Lizardman is known to be in Australia and if there's anything going on with that.
Okay, I'll take the second question first. We have the Yowie in Australia, which is the Bigfoot, and we do have Lizardman. They have some very odd-looking cryptids down there, and there are pictures of them drawn in books. So I think Lizardman's down there for sure. And with the wildfires, I mean, I think they probably just vanish into a portal. They don't have to stay around. That's what I think. Now, what is Lizardman? To the best of my knowledge, from talking to as many people as I can about it, it's a cryptid. It is interdimensional. It would likely have roots and would be alien in nature. Now, we say, we look at what is Bigfoot. And I know you two ladies are familiar with Dr. Melba Ketchum, right?
Yes.
She's a sweetheart. And I try to call her as much as I can. I get so busy. But so her DNA samples show that Bigfoot is The mother's origin is female, human, Middle East, Africa, Eastern Europe, over to India. And father is unknown origin primate. So, unknown origin means maybe not of this earth. Maybe not. We don't know. Lizard man, I think my guess, the best guess that I have is it is alien, what we would call alien. I don't think lizard man's from around here. I think it's interdimensional and alien. That's really like the only real explanation. Now, we don't have any, like Bigfoot, we have hair samples. We do. But for lizard man, we don't seem to have anything that's ever been collected. But anything that looks like that, and the few drawings that I've seen, would likely be alien and interdimensional. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess that's kind of my opinion, but that comes from talking to folks. I mean, we can't really figure it out. With Melba Ketchum's study, we kind of have a bead on the fact that Bigfoot is a hybrid of Earth female and primate unknown origin. So that kind of lets us know that maybe Bigfoot's part non-Earth and part human. But again, this is the best guess that we've got that I've been able to come up with. It's not really my guess; it just comes from talking to folks. And I've talked to Dr. Ketchum about lizard man. She said, "Have no clue, have no samples, but it doesn't necessarily seem to be of origin Earth." But we don't know. I mean, it's only a guess on lizard man, but it's scary.
That's the other question that people usually have is lizard man one of these reptilian aliens that you've heard about?
Okay, I think it is safe to say that lizard man is a separate kind of large monstrous species. In fact, I just had a conversation about this with a fellow that has seen, and he's pretty credible. He's from Kingsport, Tennessee, and he said that he has 2 times in his life seen people whose eyes dilated improperly. And you know what that means? That means does the lizard thing. And he and I both agree that lizard man is not exactly the reptilian entity. Now, I don't know anything about these reptilians other than just the basic definitions. I know
you should look into that and write a book about it. About the differences, perhaps. That would be interesting. People would like that.
Well, that's a good idea.
Somebody's asking, are they living dinosaurs?
Maybe. The fact is, since we don't have 750 of them in Scape or Swamp, one would tend to think that they go in and out of portals. And if they go in and out of portals, that would lead one to think that they are interdimensional and maybe not of origin as dinosaurs. That's the only thing that's the only chain of thought that I can come up with. I mean, if anyone's got any other, listen, if anybody has any knowledge or has any sightings that can add to the knowledge base of what we've got, I mean, that's why I'm coming out with the 2nd edition of this book. I'm trying to kind of collect everything. We can go to Lyle's book, or we can go to mine, which I've got some, stories about the weather, and the swamp and movement of the salt water. I'm trying to collect all that I can. And anybody that can help, let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. Well, that music says that's the end of the show, everybody, and we've run out of time. So I want to thank Dr. John Stamey for coming, and I'm glad he's going to come back and tell us more about his new book when it becomes available. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Mm-hmm. And remember, come subscribe to our YouTube channel at She-Squatchers Official. Help us win that race. Good night, everyone.
Win. Bye.
Bye, y'all.
Night.